Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 finally arrives, bringing you beautiful medieval countryside, rhythmic crafting, doggos,
You're my doggy, eh?
and wenches, but also a perilous world full of dangers, warfare, murder, and mysteries to be solved, but also a sprinkle of comedy.
Oh, that really shrivels the old ballsack.
And of course, your boy Henry. Now, if all of that made you say,
That is f***ing impressive.
then come with me now on this medieval journey to 15th century Bohemia in KCD2. I'll show you a little bit of what the game has to offer you while keeping this as spoiler-free as I can, only early game stuff, and thanks to PlayOn for sponsoring this video. Now, if you've played the first game, you'll know what to expect here. It's an open-world RPG with a bit of medieval survival sim in there as well. The game finds a way to bring you back to being a zero rather than a hero that you'd be at the end of the first game, so you begin with nothing but peasanty clothes and a crappy sword, so you'll be building yourself up to start looking at least somewhat formidable, which doesn't take too long at all. And this being an RPG, there is stats and skill points to level up and make yourself stronger, and it's my favorite type of XP progression system where you actually level up by doing the actions of the thing you're trying to level. For example, if you want to get good at thievery, you need to do a lot of sneaking around and pickpocketing, otherwise you're never going to level it. And the higher you level it, the more perks you'll unlock, and these can give you various advantages in that field in various ways. So this gives you the freedom to build your character how you like and fit the playstyle you enjoy. And the same idea with weapons. If you always use a sword, then you're going to get really good with swords. As you can see, I am here, but I'm not so good with axes and maces because I don't really use those that much. So a really nice natural progression system that rewards you with actual useful perks, although they have to be used sometimes in specific situations, rather than just your simple level up and gain more stat power sort of approach. So you'll be on a journey of improvement as you follow Henry's story through the lovely medieval world, which immerses you in medieval life, which can feel a little too relatable at times.
At least you know when to round up the cattle and
Bottoms
down
up.
the hay.
Aye. When I'm older and firm, folks will come to me for the weather.
So what's it going to be?
And in this world, you do have a reputation to uphold. Your actions will determine which different peoples will like or dislike you. As you can see, I managed to piss off some charcoal burners here, and these relations can make your life easier or harder. And you will find your actions do have actual consequences, not just the illusion of a consequence. And of course, a large part of this is the persuasion system, much like the first game, where you use your strengths to try and control a situation. And there are dialogue stats which will impact your chances of success, but it's not straight up about that. You do have to think about the kind of person you're talking to. So for example, if I try to use intimidation on a massive guy in full plate armor with an axe in his hand, well, it's probably not going to work. Whereas if he was a little scrawny peasant with a pitchfork, he's much more likely to be intimidated by me. So your words are incredibly important. They determine whether things go well or badly, or whether people live or die. And as the game has multiple endings, you'll want to choose your words wisely. Especially as your appearance also comes into play in all of this. If you try to pretend you're a nobleman when you're dressed like a peasant, people aren't going to buy it, and thus your conversations won't get you very far. And overall, if you walk around looking like a peasant, people will treat you like a peasant. Which is why you gotta look after yourself. You can't go running around like this, covered in blood and mud, stinking up the place. You gotta look presentable, because it does actually have an impact. You gotta wash yourself every now and again. I know, fellas, for some of you that's gonna be a tough habit to get into. But it's not just you've got to look after, it's your doggo friend Mutt as well. That's right, there is a canine companion that you will have with you at all times. If you want him there, you can tell him to go home if you're not into it. You do have to feed him though, and give him the occasional tickle, otherwise he will run away if you just ignore him all the time. But I do think it's a nice touch for this game. These kind of RPGs can be a very lonely experience, just walking around by yourself all the time, so having that option of company is pretty nice. And he does have some useful practical uses as well, like he can bark to distract enemies, he can track things, because obviously dog knows, and he will get involved in combat to help you out, so if you find the combat in this game a little bit difficult, you get a little bit of help this time. If you want him, like I say, you can tell him to stay or go home, and it is nice to have when you are seriously outnumbered, like 4v1, but in some situations he is a little bit too helpful. He makes the combat a little bit too easy, so you may want to tell him to stay put in certain fights so that you can enjoy it. But yeah, it's nice to have a little doggo companion to share the journey with. So you got to look after him, you got to look after yourself, making sure you get enough sleep, enough food. You've got those stats to worry about, so that's the kind of survival sim elements in there. You'll need to look after your weapons, your armor, your clothes, so they maintain optimal functionality and make sure you don't look a mess. You can do it yourself or just pay someone else to do it. And in terms of weapons and armor, there seems to be a lot there. This is just an early game blacksmith trader. You can see there's quite a lot of stuff, so you can find your weapon of choice and get adventuring all across the land on the back of your trusty steed, Pebbles, who makes a return from the first game. So you'll travel around following the main plot story quests or side quests, or maybe just some random encounters that you come across.
What happened to you? Please, help!
You'll meet all sorts of weird and wonderful characters along the way, like this guy.
Like already, Hans? I thought you'd be gone a lot longer.
But I'm not Hans. I'm Henry.
Yeah, right, Hans.
I have to get going. So long.
See you later, Hans.
Yeah, right.
So you'll be adventuring around, exploring the world, doing quests here and there, with Doggo at your side, looking after yourself, and of course, likely getting involved in lots of combat. So let's talk about the combat system, because it has changed somewhat from KCD1, and I will say that I haven't played the first game in a long time, so I don't remember entirely how everything worked, but the combat in this game is still very similar, although a little bit more accessible. And I know that's a scary word in video games. It usually means dumbed down, made simpler, which can also mean made boring. But I don't think that's the case here. The combat is fun and is certainly easier than what I remember of the first game. If you don't know, it's a directional system, up, down, left, right, which means there's only 4 directions, down 1 from the first game, which had 5 directions. So that's making some elements of the combat easier already. So it's about directional attacking. Blocking is just a simple button press. It's more about timing. So you'll be parrying, riposting, countering, dodging. There's combinations to learn as well. The master strikes are still there, although they're performed a little differently now. You just have to attack in the opposite direction to wherever the enemy's attacking from. And there is more elements to combat than just running into fights. For example, you might want to scout and look at what you're running into, because outnumbered fights can be pretty difficult in this game. So you may want to sneak up, use a bit of stealth to kill off one guy, leave his body so that someone discovers it, and when they go over to check him out, you hit them with a couple of arrows to get rid of them. And with a little help from your Doggo, you've turned a 7v2 into a 5v2, and that is much more manageable. And a lot of the fights you do run into will be outnumbered situations, and they can be pretty tough in Kingdom Come Deliverance. They feel a little bit easier in this game than they did in the first game, even without the help of the Doggo. I think enemies are a little bit less mindlessly aggressive, but you still do have to be careful and watch your positioning, otherwise you might get 3 guys wailing on you at once. As I say though, these outnumbered situations are considerably easier when you have the Doggo help, as he does distract an enemy or two and he can hurt them and make them bleed as well. And enemies will just pass out from bleeding in combat as well sometimes. But the Doggo does have his limits. If he takes a bit of damage, he will run off and flee for a while. So he does have his limitations. But as I say, if you don't like the idea of the dog helping you in combat and you just want to enjoy the combat, you can send the dog home or tell him to stay. So yeah, lots of fun to be had with the combat system, and maybe even more fun than the first game. There is still the depth of armor and weapons as well. For example, if you try to use slashing attacks with a sword against heavy armor, it's obviously not going to do very much, so you need an axe or a mace. But of course, a nice slashy sword against unarmored enemies works beautifully. And then of course, there's ranged combat as well. Bows and crossbows feels much easier than the first game, which makes sense, right? Because Henry's been doing archery for a while now, which I'm sure anyone who's played the first game will remember. When you first do archery, you are utterly terrible at it. Well, it's not as bad in this game, thankfully. But what's really nice about the combat system is how you can build your character to be whatever you want it to be. If you want to just be a straight up cliche melee guy like me, you can do that. But if you want to be a quick and agile archer, always staying out the way, taking nice defensive positions, you can do that too. Or if you want to be a sneaky little rogue type fella with a knife shanking everybody, pickpocketing and lockpicking all the chests and opening all the doors and going where you're not supposed to, they're all totally viable ways to play the game and level yourself. So there is a lot of what Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has to offer you, but there's still a lot I haven't even touched on. The alchemy, the blacksmithing, the horsemanship, the chicken chasing. Okay, that one might just be me. There's a lot the game has to offer, whether you've played the first game or not. Although if you haven't played the first game, I'd recommend you go and watch a lore video or something just to set the scene of the world a little bit better and understand everything. I think it will make this game better for you. So yeah, if you're in the market for a medieval open world RPG, which is based on some real history with some semi-realistic survival elements to it as well, and because it's kind of set in the real world, there's no elves, thankfully, because, you know, blech. And lastly, if you're wondering about the performance of the game, it's run pretty well for me. I get about 100 FPS on quality DLSS, so that's pretty much everything on Ultra in 1440p on a 3080 and Ryzen 7900X CPU, so it runs plenty well enough for me. And in terms of bugs and things as well, some of you may remember the first game at launch was pretty damn buggy, but this one has been pretty good so far, at least the build I'm on. I'm sure there'll be an even better build for release. There has, of course, been some bugs. There is always going to be in these kind of massive games, but nothing that ruins the game or really bothers me, just mostly little visual things that are quite infrequent and minor when they do happen. So yeah, there we go. This has been Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It's out right damn now. Do check out the link in the description if you're interested. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the future.